We need hungrier talent, Ethan. People who can push harder, move faster. That's what Jason Caldwell, the new vice president of sales at Harlow Equity, told me as he slid a crisp white envelope across the glass conference table. His tone was rehearsed, corporate, unbothered. The company's moving in a new direction. I didn't argue, I didn't even blink. I just looked down at the envelope, termination papers, and nodded slowly. My name's Ethan Royce. I'm 45. I spent 11 years at Harlow, the last 6 as senior account executive. I managed a portfolio that brought in $16.3 million annually, almost 38% of the firm's revenue. Jason had been at this company for all of 4 months. Custom suits, Ivy League MBA, and a resume that read like a pitch deck. I'd given more client presentations in dingy warehouses than he had likely attended in his career, but none of that mattered now. I picked up the envelope and slid it into my leather briefcase, next to a folded photo of my daughter's 8th grade graduation. As Jason leaned back in his chair, clearly waiting for me to object, to protest. When I didn't, he cleared his throat. You'll have a severance package, 2 months' salary, unused PTO. We'd like to keep things smooth. Of course, I said. You've got your process, I've got mine. Back at my desk, I packed up 11 years into a single cardboard box, framed family photos, my old travel mug from the Dallas trade show, a stack of business cards with worn edges, and a personal notepad where I'd written down every client birthday, anniversary, and kid's name over the last decade. As I walked past reception, Melissa, our office manager, looked up puzzled. Ethan, are you moving desks? Something like that, I smiled. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped in next to Marcus Hale, the firm's CEO. He nodded, barely recognizing me, too focused on his phone, too unaware that the guy standing inches from him had just been quietly removed like a Post-it note from a quarterly report. Out in the parking garage, I set the box in the passenger seat of my car. My phone buzzed. Text from Lucas Grant, my biggest client. Dinner next Thursday, still good? I stared at the screen. He didn't know yet. None of them did. But they would. As I drove out of downtown Chicago, the skyline slipped behind me like a finished chapter. No anger, no panic, just an eerie clarity. They didn't just fire me today. They severed the only thread connecting them to millions in long-term revenue, and they didn't even know it yet. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't pace the hallway or rant into the darkness. I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of bourbon and my old notebook, the same leather-bound journal I'd been using since my 3rd year at Harlow. Every client meeting, every milestone, every conversation that mattered, it was all there. The truth is, what Jason didn't know, what Harlow had never understood, was that the company's success wasn't built on cold calls or CRM pipelines. It was built on relationships, on trust. And trust didn't live in the corporate database. It lived in the space between 2 people who'd shaken hands after midnight in an airport bar, or shared photos of their kids over late-night Zoom calls. That's what I carried with me when I left. Not files or spreadsheets, but the trust of people who knew I showed up when it mattered. Lucas Grant of Grant & Steele. We met 6 years ago when his company was barely breaking even. I convinced our underwriters to back his expansion project when no one else would. He never forgot that. Dana from Ridgeway Logistics, I sent her flowers when her mom passed. Not because it was good business, because it was the right thing to do. The Henderson Group, their CFO calls me every year on my birthday before I even remember it myself. These weren't accounts. They were relationships nurtured over years, quietly, consistently. I opened my phone and scrolled through my contacts, my personal contacts, over 200 names, not from mass imports or sales lists, but from real conversations. Golf outings, industry dinners, family barbecues. Then I opened the employment contract I downloaded weeks earlier. The version with my signature and the updated non-compete clause. 1 year, limited by geography and scope, but only if I resigned voluntarily. I'd been let go, which meant legally, ethically, contractually, I was free to work, free to connect. Free to let the people who trusted me know that I was no longer part of Harlow Equity. Nothing more. No poaching, no pitches, just facts. And the facts would be enough. I knew Lucas had a renewal meeting with Harlow's team next Thursday. I knew Dana was reviewing new vendors this quarter. I knew the Henderson Group was due for a 3-year reassessment in 2 weeks. They were going to notice I wasn't there. And when they asked what happened, Harlow would have no good answer. They thought they'd cut cost. They'd actually cut the connective tissue. The next morning, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, looked out at the early winter sun pushing through the bare trees lining our backyard, and decided I'd make 3 calls. Not a campaign, not a counterattack, just a courtesy. I'd let them know the truth, and I'd let the consequences unfold on their own. Because you can take someone's title, their desk, their ID badge, but if you built something real, if you earned something the right way, you don't leave empty-handed. And I hadn't. I made the first call at 9:02 a.m. sharp. "Lucas," I said as soon as he picked up, "I wanted to let you know I'm no longer with Harlow Equity as of yesterday." There was a pause, not awkward, just waited. "What happened?" he asked finally. "It wasn't performance-related. They're restructuring, bringing in newer people, different direction." Another pause, longer this time. "Who's handling our account now?" "Jason Caldwell. He's the new VP. Or maybe someone from his team. You'll probably hear from him soon." Lucas exhaled hard through the line. "The guy who didn't say a word during our last meeting?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He continued, "You built that financing structure for our southern expansion. You personally negotiated our vendor terms when we were behind last quarter. Caldwell doesn't even know where our facilities are." "I just thought you deserved to hear it directly," I said. "What you do with that is completely your call." I hung up. 10 minutes later, I called Dana at Ridgeway Logistics, then Margaret at the Henderson Group. Same message. No sales pitch, no drama. Just the truth. By noon, I'd received 7 text messages, 9 emails, and 3 missed calls. From clients, vendors, and a few people I hadn't heard from in months. The industry moved fast, and word spread faster. At 2:11 p.m., my personal phone rang again. Caller ID Everett Stanton, CEO of Harlow. I let it go to voicemail. "Ethan, this is Everett. We need to talk about your transition. We're hearing some client concerns, sudden pullbacks, delays in renewal. Please call me back." I didn't. At 3:46 p.m., another message came through, this time from Brian, Jason's deputy. "Hey Ethan, Brian here. Just wanted to check in. There might be an opportunity to bring you back on a consulting basis. Just temporarily. Help with the transition." I smiled. At 5:22 p.m. Lucas texted, "Just got off the phone with Caldwell. He offered a 10% discount on our renewal. I told him we were considering options." I replied with a simple "understood." By that evening, Dana had emailed Harlow's legal department to formally terminate their 3-year contract, citing unexplained changes in relationship management. The Henderson Group followed suit the next morning. Within 36 hours, 5 major accounts representing more than $3.8 million in annual revenue had either terminated or frozen renewals. And I hadn't asked a single one to do it. Harlow had underestimated one thing. People don't stay for price. They stay for peace of mind, for predictability, for the person who answers the phone at 11 p.m. on a Friday without complaining. I didn't walk out of that building alone. I walked out with everything that actually mattered. They just didn't realize it until it was too late. The call came the next morning while I was making coffee. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. "Ethan Royce? Speaking. This is Michael Grantley, Grantley and Company." I paused. The name rang familiar. Smaller firm. Based out of Milwaukee, but with a strong Midwest reputation. Lean team, high retention, known for doing things the right way. "I've heard of you," he chuckled. "And I've heard quite a bit about you, especially these past 24 hours. Lucas Grant, Dana Ridgeway, and Margaret Henderson all seem to think you are worth chasing." I didn't say anything, just let him keep talking. "We've been looking to expand our presence in Illinois, but we're not just looking for a book of business. We're looking for someone who built it the right way, someone who understands clients aren't just contracts, they're relationships." Still quiet on my end. "We're prepared to offer you a senior vice president position, full autonomy over your accounts, a 6-figure signing bonus, and a seat on our executive committee. You'd have say in strategy, staffing, everything." I leaned against the kitchen counter. This wasn't a handout. This was respect wrapped in opportunity. "Why me?" I asked. "Because while Harlow's been trying to keep up appearances, you've been proving what actually works. You're not just a salesman, Ethan. You're a stabilizer, and clients follow stability." I looked out the window. Snow had started falling again. Clean slate, I thought. "How soon would you need me?" "How's tomorrow sound?" I smiled. "Send over the paperwork. I'll review it tonight." We ended the call. I stood in my kitchen for a long moment, just breathing. Not with relief, not with triumph, just clarity. At 2 p.m., another message from Harlow came through. Jason Caldwell this time. The board approved a retention package. Full salary for 6 months, plus equity options. Just help us transition these accounts. Let's not burn bridges. I didn't reply, because the bridge had already burned the moment they assumed my value could be replaced by a cheaper suit and a CRM login. Grantley's offer arrived in my inbox that evening. Everything Michael promised, plus something else, an equity track, profit sharing, ownership. That was the part that hit me hardest. Not because of the money, but because someone finally saw that the foundation I built was worth investing in, not extracting from. I signed the documents before bed. The next morning I drove north, quiet highway, fresh snow, a man moving not out of spite but into something better. When I arrived at Grantley's downtown office, the receptionist greeted me like she already knew my name. My new office overlooked the lake. Nothing extravagant, just a window, a desk, and a chance to start fresh. By noon, Lucas Grant called. "So this is the new place?" "It is." "Good. We're moving everything over next week. No pitch, no contract request, just trust." They weren't following a firm. They were following the person who showed up, who stayed consistent, who made good on promises. That afternoon, I unpacked the same frame photo from my daughter's graduation, placed it on my desk, same city, new story. And this time it would be mine to write, fully, freely on my terms. 3 days into my new role at Grantley, I received a call from a familiar number, Julia Stanton, my former executive assistant at Harlow. She didn't waste time with small talk. "Do you have a minute?" "Of course. I figured you should know." It wasn't just Brian wanting his own team. I leaned back in my chair, eyes narrowing at the Chicago skyline beyond the window. "Go on." "They were planning to sell the company," she said quietly. "Veritas Capital, private equity group. They made a preliminary offer 2 months ago, but with a condition: client portfolios needed to be transferable, with no executive dependencies." I closed my eyes. It clicked instantly. They wanted to break the link between me and the clients. "Exactly," she said. "That's why they brought Brian in. Not to grow sales, to convert your relationships into sellable assets. And the only way to do that was to remove me." She paused. They didn't think the clients would follow. I felt something in my chest, not anger, not sadness. Something colder, sharper. Betrayal that had been disguised as corporate realignment. "Is the sale still happening?" I asked. "No. Veritas pulled the offer yesterday. Said the client base is too unstable now. Too much tied to individuals no longer employed." Their words, not mine. Not. I nodded slowly, digesting every word. "They underestimated the value of trust," I said, "and overestimated the power of logos." Julia exhaled. "I'm leaving next week. Got an offer from a smaller firm downtown. Honestly, I don't want to be anywhere near the fallout." "Smart move," I said, "and thanks for the call." After we hung up, I sat motionless for a long time, my hands folded in front of me. So that was it. It had never been about performance, never about metrics or projections. It was about control, about stripping down what I'd built so it could be sold like inventory. They weren't just trying to replace me. They were trying to repackage the entire foundation of the business for short-term gain. But they'd made one fatal miscalculation. People don't like being treated as leverage. That afternoon, I called Lucas Grant. "Quick question," I said. "Did anyone from Veritas ever reach out to you back when I was still at Harlow?" "Yeah," he replied. "Now that you mention it, some guy named Thomas said he was a strategic advisor. Asked a lot of questions about our long-term goals, our risk tolerance, vendor relationships. Same script." I called Dana next, then Margaret. Each confirmed the same pattern. Someone from Veritas had been quietly meeting with them under the guise of market research, probing, positioning, preparing. They'd set the table behind my back, assuming the relationships would stay seated. They were wrong. That night, I sat in my new office at Grantley with the lights off, the city glowing outside. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt clean, because now I knew the truth. They didn't let me go because I wasn't performing. They let me go because I performed too well, too connected, too trusted, too human to fit into their spreadsheet. And that was something they could never duplicate, only lose. 3 weeks later, I stood behind the stage curtain at the Midwest Financial Services Conference, sipping lukewarm hotel coffee from a paper cup. My name was on the program, Building Client Loyalty in a Transactional Market, and I was slotted as the final speaker of the day. It wasn't my first panel, but this one felt different. Not because of the crowd, not because of the venue, but because I knew exactly who was sitting in the audience. Near the back, beside the coffee station, I spotted Everett Stanton, CEO of Harlow Equity. He wasn't alone. Two board members flanked him like quiet guards, nodding politely at whoever passed. They didn't see me, but I saw them. I wasn't here to confront. I wasn't here to gloat. I was here to tell the truth, just not in the way they expected. When it was my turn, I stepped onto the stage, adjusted the mic, and clicked the first slide. No logos, no dramatic taglines, just three words in bold. People, trust, outcomes. I want to start with a story, I began, my voice calm, steady. 6 months ago, I transitioned from one firm to another, quietly. No press release, no announcements, just a man, a briefcase, and years of client relationships built the old-fashioned way. I advanced the slide. Client retention rate, 94%. Average response time, down 53%. Client satisfaction score up 22 points. Implementation costs, down 30%. These aren't projections. These are actual metrics from clients who followed me to Grantley and Company in the last 3 months. I let the silence hold. No discounts, no incentives, just trust. Behind the numbers were stories, like Lucas Grant, who doubled his portfolio within weeks of switching firms, or Dana Ridgway, who called me at midnight with a supply chain issue and had it solved before sunrise. But I didn't name them. I didn't have to. The lesson here isn't about how to steal clients, I continued. It's about understanding why clients stay in the first place. Slide click. When companies treat relationships like assets on a balance sheet, clients notice. And they respond with their feet. I scanned the audience. Everett sat still, his face unreadable. One board member was furiously typing notes. Someone in the back raised a hand during Q&A. You said the clients followed you, the young analyst said. Isn't that exactly why companies hesitate to give too much autonomy to individual executives? Fair question. I nodded. It's a risk, yes, I said. But the greater risk is building a company so detached from humanity that your clients forget why they trusted you in the first place. A murmur of agreement moved through the room. I stepped down to polite applause, not thunderous but genuine. And that was enough. Backstage, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls, 2 emails, 1 new client inquiry, a firm I'd never worked with but who'd been in the room. That night, I walked back to my hotel through the quiet streets of downtown Milwaukee. The sky was clear, the air sharp. No headlines, no revenge, just the satisfying weight of truth well told. 2 days after the conference, the financial news hit. Harlow Equity announces executive restructuring. CEO Stanton steps down amid revenue declines. I read the headline once, then set my phone face down on the table. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel pity either. Just confirmation of everything I already knew. The day after my panel, Grantley and Company signed 3 new letters of intent. 2 came from firms who had never worked with me, but sat in that ballroom. The third came from a client I hadn't spoken to in over 4 years. Turns out, in an industry obsessed with automation, the human element had become rare enough to feel revolutionary. Back at Harlow, the unraveling had begun. Julia texted me updates from the inside. Contracts were being pulled. Partners were spooked. The Veritas Capital acquisition was officially dead. Brian? Gone. Pursuing other opportunities, the press release said. Quiet exit for a man who once walked the hallways like he owned them. Clients were still leaving. Not because I asked, but because they no longer saw a reason to stay. Meanwhile, at Grantley, my world was changing fast. In under 5 months, we had doubled our Midwest business. My client portfolio alone accounted for over $8.6 million in recurring revenue, nearly half of it from former Harlow accounts. But this time, I wasn't just building numbers. I was building structure. 2 analysts reported directly to me, young, eager, smart. I didn't bury them in cold calls or busy work. I taught them what no MBA class could. How to listen, how to follow through, how to earn trust one decision at a time. We launched a feedback system for clients. We implemented quarterly relationship reviews, not for contract compliance, but to ask a simple question. How can we be better? Every Friday afternoon, I sat down with my team for a recap, not a performance review. A conversation. What went right, what didn't, who needed support. No fear, no politics. This wasn't about being nicer, it was about being smarter, because I knew firsthand what happened when you built a house with no foundation. I'd seen it collapse in real time. 6 months to the day after I left Harlow, I stood in Grantley's top floor boardroom, surrounded by the partners. A single slide on the projector. Q2 results, 34% growth. Yo, why? New business, $11.2 million. Client retention, 98. Michael Grantley raised his glass. to the best acquisition we've ever made, and we didn't even have to buy a company to get it. Polite laughter. I smiled but didn't speak. Some wins don't need words. After the meeting, I returned to my office. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long golden streaks across the wood-paneled walls. I poured myself a coffee, not bourbon this time, and looked out at the city I hadn't left, but had finally started seeing with new eyes. Grantley wasn't perfect. No place was. But here I was heard. I was trusted. I was invested in. I opened my laptop to find an email from Dana Ridgway. Saw the numbers. You're killing it. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. And then another from someone unexpected. Alicia Winters, the young woman Brian once tried to place as my replacement. Let go last week. Not sure what's next. If Grantley's hiring, I'd love to be part of what you're building. I stared at her message for a long moment, then hit forward. To HR. Worth interviewing. What happened wasn't her fault, because that's what real leadership does. Builds, doesn't punish, moves forward without dragging the past behind. 1 year to the day after Jason Caldwell slid the termination papers across that polished glass table, I signed the final documents making me a full equity partner at Grantley and Company. No champagne, no grand announcement. Just a quiet moment at my desk, sunlight pouring across the dark walnut grain as I clicked my pen and wrote my name with steady hands. The firm had grown 34% since I arrived. My personal portfolio now represented $20 million in recurring revenue. But the number that meant the most wasn't on any spreadsheet. It was the number of people who had stayed, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because they trusted not just what I built, but how I built it. That morning, I approved hiring 3 new relationship managers, not as subordinates, but as partners in training. They'd receive the same profit-sharing structure I had negotiated for myself. Because I had learned the hard way, no one should build something just to have it taken away. I wasn't trying to make the next Ethan Royce. I was building a system where no one's value could be quietly erased by a spreadsheet. At noon, I received a handwritten note. Couriered, earned. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting before I even opened the envelope. Everett Stanton, you were right. I put transaction above relationship. It cost the company everything. If you're ever willing to grab coffee, I'd appreciate the chance to apologize in person. I folded the note and placed it in my jacket pocket. Maybe someday, I thought. Not yet. That evening, Rebecca and I walked hand in hand into our son's school auditorium. He was playing trumpet in the spring jazz concert, something I never would have made time for in my old life. I sat in the front row, no phone, no emails, just watching. He caught my eye before the first song, smiled, and gave me a little nod. And that was the moment I realized I hadn't just rebuilt a career, I'd rebuilt a life. A life on my terms. A life that wouldn't be taken from me the next time someone decided I was too expensive. As I shut down my computer that night, I glanced at the framed quote Rebecca had given me the Christmas after my termination. A simple sentence, etched in quiet ink. The best revenge is massive success. I smiled, flipped this frame down, and walked out.